All right, everyone. Welcome to the July monthly transmission. I'm Kat, and so excited to be here. Okay, so for anyone who's watching who is new to this medicine, I'll just open with a little bit of some context of this lineage and what it's about. So, I am initiated in a West African lineage of shamanism, and the main modality that we work with is stick divination. And this particular modality has been in play for thousands of years. It is one of the oldest forms of divination. And most people have never encountered West African shamanism in particular, let alone this kind of divination. When I encountered it, it was in the wilds of Northern California, and it immediately resonated with me. I love sticks, I love nature. But really, when I started working with this medicine, it dramatically reshaped my world in 2 years, like complete 180. So the power of this medicine is truly one of the most amazing things about it. And to experience that level of healing and transformation without ingesting any kind of sacrament is one of the reasons that I find it to be so powerful. So, with all of that said, there's so much more I could say about the technology and the lineage and the people that this comes from, the Dagara people. I want to give homage to them. But let's focus on the transmission. So, I think that this has been coming up a lot in pretty much every month. Just this time of enormous transformation that we're moving through as a species, as society, as a planet. And that really continues to be like the focus of what's coming through. And really, today, what they were talking about is how we are in this big unbinding, right? This removing of shackles, the unwinding of stories, and the releasing of the energy that's been kind of bound up inside of those things. So there's a lot that's being released right now, is one way to think about it. And what they were saying to me is like, we are really coming up to the edge of ancestral consciousness. And this is something that's been kind of coming into my space recently. And I love this definition because think about it. Your ancestors had an experience of the world, right? They had ideas about how it worked based on what they lived through, what was possible in those time periods. And as we evolve and invent more technology and expand our own consciousness, we expand reality itself. So when I talk about reaching the edge of ancestral consciousness, we are actually coming up against all of the previous limitations of what our ancestors could even fathom, what they could conceive of. So we are actually moving past these frontiers of what was anticipated, what was envisioned, and what could even be predicted. So what this means is like we are really kind of like in one sense at the edge of the world, right? In terms of what we can even think about, conceive of, or envision. And that's a pretty powerful place, right? It's like we're at the edge of the map. And so what that means is like we are moving past these paradigms, the realities that were envisioned by previous generations, we've blown past it. And now we are entering and arriving in places, right, that we are still learning how to imagine. We are still gaining the courage to dream this big. So, challenges are unique to different generations. The challenges that every generation previous to you experienced were very different, right? And so, what I love about that is we are entering an era of very different kinds of challenges. There's going to be things that are unique to our generation, and that is going to expand our consciousness in order to even approach, let alone solve the problems we are facing as a species, right? As a planet right now, we are going to have to evolve even farther. So, one of the ways that they framed this to me was how we are kind of fracturing off of the mother tree. And what that means is, we talk about lineage as a tree, an ancestral tree, right? And this idea of kind of like splitting off from that, like, whew, we are in new territory. Um, so we are divesting in a sense. We are actually divesting from a consciousness that has been really in play for a long time. And what they're saying is like there's a lot of things happening on our planet right now that are evidence of that. And I think the political landscape is a really potent one to look at, right? Without getting too far into the weeds here, there's just so much happening where it's like, why are we electing these ancient men, right? That makes no sense. That does not reflect the reality of what, is the dominant sort of median, like American. It is just not representative of who we are as a country, as a culture, as a species, and so on. So that's an example that I think is really kind of happening right now to reveal this fracturing, right? Where like there is many different things splintering off right now. Um, but the reality is like that mentality, and like I'll use again, like this mentality of like these ancient men who are supposed to be our leaders, that can take us no further. We are at the end of the road there. That paradigm, that worldview, that approach is donezo. It is simply not viable any longer. So, and the reality is like we see where it leads, right? It's perpetuating this extinct consciousness. And one of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein is, "You cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it." And that's actually the juncture we're at right now, right? Is like there's certain people that are just trying to exist within that old paradigm and solve the problems of that old paradigm from that consciousness. And it's not going to happen. So instead, we're in this like quantum leap moment of like, ooh, we haven't yet burst through the veil into that next dimension of consciousness that's going to reveal where some of the answers exist. But we know this old one ain't gonna cut it anymore. So we're kind of at that crossroads of consciousness right now as a culture, as a planet. Now, new thoughts create new realities. And I want you to really understand that your thoughts they create forms, they bring life into form. They're an energy that manifests things. So we are really in this moment where there is a opportunity to think new thoughts, to think radical thoughts, to think thoughts that expand your world beyond what you could have even conceived of. So it's really important in this moment, and I've been noticing this happening for me a lot personally in the past few weeks, right? Is like bumping up against something that feels like a limiting thought or belief, right? And being like, "Ooh, oh, okay, that's still here. There's still this pattern loop playing out in my psyche, in my consciousness, in my world." And I think a lot of us are actually bumping up against this right now, right? We're starting to notice, like, oh, this doesn't work. This is an old, kind of archaic way of doing something. This is no longer viable for me, right? So, the opportunity for us right now, and it's so simple and so challenging, is to notice where those loops are, to notice where you get stuck in the loops of your existing limiting thoughts. Because what they're saying is that these loops, and they kept showing me chains, right? These loops are the literal chains on your thoughts because they just cycle over and over and over. So I want you to think about what it means to bind something. It means to wrap it so it is imprisoned, right? Contained. And that's exactly what our thoughts do, is they bind us to something. And if we keep circling that thought and allowing it to circulate in us, we have created a chain, a prison, especially if that thought no longer serves us, or if that thought is keeping us rooted, stuck in an outdated consciousness, right? A consciousness that actually can no longer serve the human, the being we are becoming. So, as I said, this is where we have a big opportunity. And sometimes I love when they're just like, yeah, the ritual is like, look at your shit, look at your thoughts, right? Because sometimes we really struggle to do that. Um, but this is also one of the most important foundational reformatting like opportunities we have. And we have to be willing to really see it and to really investigate, is this thought serving me? And again, I think we're in this moment where a lot of us are encountering that because again, we're in this like breaking of the chains. There's a lot of energy that's kind of bumping up against and creating friction. So we must invent new paths forward out of the mud. Okay? That's really what we're being tasked with as a human community. And learning how to identify these thought loops and really see them for what they are, which is a prison, a chain, a loop, a binding. This is good practice. This is the muscle we have to develop now, is the discernment of what thought forms are actually coming with me into this next level of my life, of my development, of my consciousness. Because we are really entering some wild waters, y'all. Like, we don't have a lot of spaciousness to be loosey-goosey with our thoughts and entertain thoughts that are not good for us. So, one that's like come up for me recently is like moments of scarcity or feeling competition, and then being like, wait a second, competition is so old world, right? Like, we are entering this era of collaboration, of really needing to work together to arrive at better solutions that work for more people, right? So in the same way that like maybe like power hierarchies are very old world, old consciousness, what is that new thought? What is that like transformation? What is that inversion? So one question to ask yourself when you notice you're bumping up against this thing that feels really like ew, like that's not for me, that's no longer working, that's outdated. How can I think a different thought? So one thing I suggest, and this might not be like true in every situation, but it's a really powerful thought experiment, which is, what if I did the opposite, right? If I'm feeling like, oh, I need to compete with someone in order to like secure the bag, what if I collaborated with them instead, right? If the old thought is, oh, one person in charge, what if all of us were in charge, right? These are very simplistic, kind of references, but you get the idea. So the truth is, this isn't about doing it right. We need to get rid of that. That is not a helpful thought. That's an old thought, right? That's a perfectionism like trick. But rather, instead of doing it right, we're always going to get it wrong first of all. But we are practicing this to create a suppleness in our consciousness. And they kept using that word suppleness, right? Like flexibility, ease, like a feeling of like, ooh, there's more here that I can work with. A consciousness that is supple can breathe. It is resilient. It doesn't react. It works with, it moves with. And that's really what we need more of in our world right now, is less rigidity and more suppleness. Because suppleness is always going to lead us to new configurations, new ideas, new possibilities. Flexibility leads us in so many directions, right? If we're willing to let go of this is the way I've always done things, then all of a sudden so many other pathways open up. So yeah, a lot has been revealed to us over the past couple weeks and months about where we get stuck in the mud. So notice what you've been noticing about yourself. Notice the patterns, the thoughts you've been thinking that feel old, stuck, rigid, right? Fixed. And experiment. How can you play with that? How can you really give yourself the supple space to play with it and to give yourself grace. You don't need to figure it out right away. That's an old thought. But rather, can I create more possibilities for myself that feel expansive, that allow me to like grow into new forms? Because that's what the game is, y'all. We are in a game of consciousness, and that is how we evolve. So, those of us who are willing to take those risks, those of us who are willing to be wrong, those of us who are willing to fuck it up in service of that experimentation are actually going to go farther, right? Because, like, if you're in this room, right? Like, think of a closed room with a flashlight. Like, if you're willing to shine it all around and get in the corners, you're going to see more. You're going to notice that there's more space that you can take up. But if you're not even willing to turn the light on or look in these corners, you're just going to remain in the dark. You're going to stay there and get scared. So you already know where some of your biggest limitations and insecurities and restrictive patterns are. Like, we're all doing the work here. So what's been happening, what I've been noticing is like there's been this agitation as of late, right? It's kind of like, ooh, we're really getting like worked over, rubbed on the rocks. And that's on purpose, right? Like none of this is by accident. We are getting rubbed on the rocks so you can really see that thing that's like not serving you. And for once and for all, like do it different. So, what they said for this one is your ritual is to interrupt the pattern, to like start getting that responsive in your own conditioning that you can say, ooh, 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 there's that thing that keeps me stuck. And how do I interrupt it? How can I take that right now? And instead of punishing myself or being like, you did that wrong, or why can't you think better, right? Just be like, ooh, how can I do it different? Where could I try something that feels new or bigger, more expansive, more like wild? Investigate what could take its place. Have I thought about this? Could I play with that? Could I try this out? So, some questions for you, some generative questions. What would expand your world, right? If we're like, ooh, there's this thought about competition, what would expand your world? Ooh, collaboration, having more resources, more power, right? More people involved to really lift this thing off the ground. So, what would expand your world right now if you were to replace that thought? What would invite you into new ways of moving? What is something you haven't tried before? What is something that feels uncomfortable? What is a risk you could take? Try that on for size. See what happens. You can always double back, but why not go forward in a new direction? Because that's what we're being asked to do ultimately. And again, they talked a lot about collaboration. So, what would give you the opportunity to collaborate in new ways? Um, and this is kind of at the heart of like the whole transmission today, because we are moving into a bigger than us solution. And we haven't found that solution right now. Okay. We're like not there yet. But that is what is being asked of us is like, it's going to take more than you. It's going to take many of us to bring the kind of consciousness and literal like brain power to the work that needs to happen now. And that can either feel really defeatist, right? That can feel like, ooh, crushing weight of the world on our shoulders, or new thought, what an interesting opportunity. What a powerful game we get to play. How am I going to play that game? What is the archetype or avatar that I'm going to be in that game? Is there something I haven't done yet that could feel even more expansive? So, if that makes you uncomfortable, this is an opportunity to lean into those places and investigate. Why does it feel so uncomfortable? What conditioning, what idea, what rule have you adopted or taken on or taken in that tells you otherwise? So they really kind of ended with this whole visual of like going back to this unbinding and like the chains of these thoughts. There's so many ways that we can use a chain, right? If we're working with this idea of like this loop, and they kind of kept showing me those chains that like you make for holiday parties out of like paper, right? You can cuff yourself, right? You can limit your movements with a chain, or you can link yourself into stronger networks, stronger bonds around you. You can use that chain to build something bigger than you, or you can use that chain to limit you. So what are you going to do? That's really the question that we are being given right now. So, with that in mind, I want to move into the next message that came through, which it's really important to state who it came from, which is the star ancestors. And the star ancestors are the first ancestors, right? Like go all the way back. That may be the very first humans. Okay. And now the whole purpose of the star ancestors is really they hold the soul's blueprint, right? The individual and collective destiny of every person here. So they came in to say that the path is happening. And again, this is something I'm seeing a lot of right now in personal divinations is that a lot of us are like there is a big activation happening as well, right? A lot's getting agitated, a lot's getting looked at because a lot is getting activated and needs to be activated. So the soul blueprint is the encoded key of what your soul came here to do, right? And you have many blueprints, right? Every lifetime you've lived a different blueprint. And there's, a lot of different possibilities, but for the ease and simplicity of this message, I want to say that there is a core one that you came onto this planet to accomplish, right? And it kind of keeps us on track. Of course, we have free will, we can deviate, but when we are like moving with this blueprint, when we are allowing this blueprint to express itself through us, we are on the path. And the path, it's happening. It happens through us. It's not something we are walking passively. It is what we are becoming. So if you feel like things have recently accelerated for you, like there's been this uptick in energy or opportunities or things that are taking place in your life that feel like they're moving you closer to your destiny, your purpose, your path, what have you, that's exactly what's happening. And if you feel that you're being agitated out of a stagnancy or stupor or a numbness, right? That's exactly what's happening. Like there is, kind of a booster effect going down right now on this planet because we actually need everyone, as much as possible, right? Not everyone's gonna like turn on, but we do need a mass like acceleration of consciousness because that's the only way we're going to get to where we need to go. And again, this is really noticeable in like the political arena right now. And in a lot of places where there's unrest, where there's like division, where there's a lot of fuckery going down, this isn't acceptable any longer. The state of things, no bueno. What's happening should make you mad. What's happening is supposed to activate the ideas, the thoughts, the approaches, the destiny that you came here to live and express. Because that way of doing things, that old consciousness, that old way, that limiting rigidity is creating a tension. It is brushing up against and compressing the parts of us that are actually like ready to pop. So, I know a lot of us are really stirred and bothered and upset and wondering what we can do right now. And a lot of us feeling like, I don't know what to do. Like there's not enough, right? We can't do enough to really feel like we're making the kind of change that needs to happen or to see the kind of impact or results that would make a difference. And I say that for a lot of stuff happening in the world right now. Um, and I'll say this, like the ways that we have traditionally done things are not enough. So like social media activism is something that a lot of us kind of rely upon because it's just become like the status quo way that we show up and take a stand and have a platform. But it's not enough. That's not actually changing things. Like you don't fight the oppressor using the tools of the oppressor. And whether you want to believe it or not, like social media is not it is not as radically liberating as we'd like to think. Yes, there are some really radical and liberating movements happening on it, but it is still a limiting system that is not truly in service to the people. Um, so yeah, there's this moment happening, there's this activation happening that is really designed and inspiring how we organize community organisms. And that was a really purposeful word. It isn't just community systems or structures or communities, it's seeing community as an organism, seeing ourselves as a part of that organism, building and strengthening these networks in ways that are both like happening on the ground, right? Locally, like also internationally too, but it can't just happen virtually. It can't just happen through passive posting. Like again, this is not actual activism in the way that we are being invited into. And finally, we need to optimize for change. Like the world is changing very rapidly. We are standing at the precipice of some pretty terrifying um, the erosion of human rights all over the world, right? So again, kind of thinking about that like suppleness of consciousness, like the optimizing for change is like, can you pivot? Can you be flexible? Can you adapt? Can you roll? Can you resist? Can you be willing enough to shift when you are asked to shift? Can you show up for that? Because the reality is that there are possibilities beyond what exists right now, or what we currently know, or what we have been conditioned to see and pay attention to. And so, again, a lot of this too is also about like undoing and unbinding ourselves from the conditioning of these old mentalities and modalities. Now, again, how do we expand beyond the known? You have to expose yourself. You have to actively go out and seek new frontiers to move and expand your world, your way of doing things. So it is really a time of actively going out to expose yourself to new people, to new ideas, situations, while simultaneously strengthening the connections that resonate most with your spirit, with your dharma, with your soul template, what have you. One of the invitations, and I really love this, is to really be that person who is hosting, like standing up and calling people together and using their space and resources and energy and time to explore bigger questions together. Again, if you think about consciousness as a resource, then we need to pool resources. We need more like computing power behind these problems in ways that are generating and creating the possibility of new solutions. So I love this, bigger questions together. The solution that we're looking for lives inside the community organism. It's not a one person solution, it's not a two-person solution, it's a multi-headed hydra solution. And in order to see it, we must shed the hyper individualism that blinds us. That is at the root of so much of our pain. It's unreal. So there's kind of there's like a bigger view on this ritual, so I'll start there and then we'll get into the more concrete ritual. But the big invitation, and this is like I'm so Jones to see how people actually play with this. The big invitation is play with consciousness networks. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, I want you to think about, okay, if I have this whole network and each of us is a brilliant human with like creativity and ideas and optimism and zest for life and the desire to see real change happen. If I were to get 10 of these visionary weirdos together, what could happen? What could happen if we really just like played with that for a little bit? That's a consciousness network. Okay. So there's something in that playground, in that permutation that we're being invited into right now. And there's some examples that kind of like came up that I'll share, and these are not the only ones. And um, I invite you to think about like what comes up for you. What ways could you even play with how this consciousness network engages itself? So one example is there's something called a Power of Eight prayer circle. And, this is something I've played with before with some friends where it's like, okay, what would happen if like eight people came together and prayed over something that, whether it's a sick person in their community or someone needs to make rent, right? Can the power of prayer really generate enough energy to really create a miracle? Who knows, right? Are we willing to find out? Um, this is kind of a silly one, but I like it nonetheless because I'm trying to find some like relatable like ways of framing this. The other one is perhaps some people have played this game. One word for it is exquisite corpse. And it's a party game. It's kind of an older party game, but the idea being like everyone holds a piece of this story and everyone creates a piece of the story. So like someone writes the first sentence and then the next person writes the next sentence. And each time you kind of fold back, you kind of fold it over. So the person writing the next sentence only has an idea of the sentence before. And it creates kind of this chaotic, hilarious, innovative, inventive story that is bigger than one person, right? And it goes a lot of interesting places because it's not just one person's narrative. So that, could be a format or a game to play with like, hey, what would we do about this problem in our community? Or like, hey, what would we do if like we kicked out, the like president? Another one, this isn't for everyone, that's okay. Uh, what would happen if like you and a group of people took mushrooms or a sacrament of some kind, right? Plant medicine, a psychedelic, and journeyed together around a defined theme or topic. Like, hey, y'all, let's all journey together and like set the intention of like, what does collective healing really look like for us at a community level? What would happen? Like, what happens? And when you come back together, or like, how do you use that space to even, weave these narratives or insights or revelations that come up? And then there's other more like practical, like mind mapping, collective ideas, having unconferences, right? Unconferences being a structure where a group of people get together and they all suggest like, hey, I want to talk about, I want to talk about gardening. I want to talk about poetry. I want to talk about radical activism and different people. It's more of a peer-to-peer knowledge sharing experience versus like, here's the experts and influencers and here's the peons. So these are just some of the consciousness network ideas that I was given or that I'm familiar with. But I really invite and like, what comes up for you? What is something that you want to play or experiment with? Is there an idea you have that feels like, ooh, interesting? Like, who are eight people I could get together and do this with? Really, what the beings were saying is that any activity that invites us to hold this problem together and to dream into a solution together is powerful. And to do that with not just our eight best friends, but like, what if I did that with eight people at work and kind of did it in a new way or a new context, right? Can we start pollinating these consciousness networks in new ways? So here's an actual ritual that can really support this initiative. Um, so let's say that there's a group of people that you want to kind of explore this with. Like, what could we envision together or dream together? What is made more possible through the shared, like, resourcing of our consciousness in this group? So maybe think about like, what would we want to explore together? What problem, what activity, what thing feels really resonant, real, relevant for this group? So gather a group together, right? Decide what you want to explore together. And it could be, your family, your friend group, your polycule, right? Like so many different arrangements here. Ask yourselves, like, what are we here to dream into? What is a topic or theme or, right? What do we want to explore? Is it a communal living space and how do we make that happen? Is it a new collectively held business? Is it like what is the most radical future we could envision for us? Go big, go small, do whatever feels good to you. So you are then invited to sit in a circle. And if you're all in the same place, this is great. You can do that together. But even if you're all dispersed, right, you can still host this via Zoom. What matters is that everyone has access to earth, to land, right? Because that's a key part of this ritual. And so however you organize, whether it's in person or decentralized, everyone is going to get a small pile of dirt from their home outside, right? Like somewhere nearby. You're going to hold it in your hand as you all are kind of talking and exploring what we want to do together. Now, once you've defined that shared intention, one by one, you're going to go around the circle and everyone is going to speak their intentions, their visions, their goals, right, for this shared intention. Even if it varies from other people, right? Like this is not about all of us adhering to the same thought, but again, expanding the thought, giving it more dimension together. So it's actually great if people have some slightly varying ideas on what they want to get out of this, what they want to put into this. So, things to speak into is like, what would you like to see happen? What is your desire? What do you want to make manifest here? And so when everyone has done that, when you've gone around the circle, everyone has spoken out loud into their little pile of dirt, you're going to offer this dirt back to the earth, back to the earth spirit with gratitude for making this dream, this collective vision manifest. Now, you're going to do that while, like if you can still have the Zoom up or whatever, but you're going to go outside, you're going to do that. If you're all together, right, in the same place, you're going to mix this dirt together so you kind of like all get it in there. And then you're going to spit on the dirt. And whenever we offer like part of us, right, part of our DNA, it's very like, it's a covenant, it's an agreement, and it's a powerful one. We're kind of like putting our like, John Hancock blood oath on it. So you're going to spit on the earth that you've just offered back to the earth, and then you're going to pour some water on it as healing, right? Like let this vision be healing. Let the manifestation of the vision be healing. And thank you to the earth spirit for helping make it so. Now, what was suggested is that this would be optimal if done before a big storm, right? So like, be mindful, don't be out in the wilderness, like unsheltered before a big storm. But like, if you can somehow time it where you do this activity, get the dirt back out there and then it pours, that is a really, really powerful offering. Because what happens is the waters are taking that prayer deeper, deeper, deeper into the earth, right? So your intentions are getting seeded and spread throughout the earth. And the earth spirit makes things manifest. It gives dimension to what wants to, be given life. So there's a really powerful opportunity here, really like a powerful way to make some possibility more possible. And then, of course, you're going to reaffirm this intention over the course of the next 5 weeks. So, ideally it's done on the same time, like every Saturday or what have you, where you're kind of going to do the same thing, right? And you can meet all in the same place. You can do it over Zoom. You can do it independently. But the whole point is that everyone is still going out to the earth, taking a scoop, re-speaking their intentions, updating their intentions. If there's any shifts, right? Any developments. Oh, I really want to do this now, or I feel like this is part of it, right? Speak that into the earth. And then offer it back, spit and pour water on it. And this is just continuing to strengthen and refine and update and expand that shared vision. So, so if you can't do it in the same place, try and do it, organize it somehow so you can all continue that process and see what blooms as a result. See what gains more strength, power, and clarity in your world because you are holding this shared intention together. All right, so that's a powerful ritual. I'm really excited to see what happens, and please feel free to reach out and share. It's always fun to hear kind of what comes up as a result of these rituals. Okay, y'all, that is all that I have for tonight to share. I so appreciate everyone being here. Thank you for being in the medicine with me. This is such an honor. And thank you so much. We'll see you next time.